Happy Sunday.
Oh, happy Sunday.
We're here. We made it. Another week down.
Check.
Check. We actually were just chatting before time started to run out on us before we started the stream. Just talking about the state of the world. So we're a little sad now and ready to get into Star Trek.
Yeah. Ready to forget about the real world for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. It got too real, man. It got
Yeah.
too real. so, so today, if you're here for the first time, welcome. This is our casual Star Trek Sunday discussion. I'm Erin. I do science consulting for Star Trek. A longtime Star Trek fan. Have Vulcan script tattooed on my arm. And it's my friend Samantha, who has never seen Star Trek before. So we started a little while ago. Oh, thank you, Josh. We started a couple years ago. You watched Voyager for the first time. And then we've kind of moved through some other series. Then we got Picard down, and now we're almost done with TNG. I think we'll have maybe another month of TNG, and then that's it. So
Hard to believe.
yeah. So how's
Yeah.
it going? How are you enjoying it?
I'm loving it. This is
Good.
incredible.
Thanks, Erin. Have fun. No worries. I'm glad. It is fun. Some stuff is like you kind of know about from culture, and then others it's
Right.
like, oh,
Exactly. Definitely.
but it's been
So,
fun. So we're at the end of season 6. So this week we're going to talk about the episodes Suspicions, Rightful Heir, Second Chances, which I'm excited to talk about, Timescape, and Descent Part 1 and 2. So the end of season 6 and the beginning of season 7. Weird bunch of episodes.
yeah. Last week's was just kind of weird in general. This was just weird as in like not great.
It's funny though, because we've talked about how certain seasons or arcs or sets of episodes tend to focus on character development for individual characters. And I think particularly we saw that with Worf early on, like season 5 into season 6. This set of episodes, while there are not a lot of winners in here, does have some great moments for Beverly Crusher, which we haven't really focused on her in a few seasons. So that was nice to see.
Yeah, totally. She was kind of a badass in some of these episodes, and I've always thought she had an inner badass, and this really like proved it.
Definitely. Yeah, she's really good in that. So speaking of that, we'll kick off and talk a little bit about Suspicions. So this is the episode where it starts off with Beverly Crusher basically packing her bags, and Guinan comes in and says like, what's going on? And she's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm relieved of duty. I'm out of here. No more for me. And kind of we then flash back and find out that essentially Beverly Crusher took it upon herself to kind of have this scientific summit where there was a Ferengi scientist who had this theory about metaphasic shielding, I think. Didn't write it down. Okay. And he wants to test this theory. So she gets this whole summit together, and I didn't mind this episode. I thought this was a pretty good episode.
It was solid. Yeah.
It's got some good high stakes parts, and we got to see Ferengi scientist.
Yeah, this was like literally the only Ferengi I've ever come across that has not annoyed the crap out of me.
And you haven't seen Deep Space Nine yet, so.
I'll preface with that, yes.
Yeah. But that's fair. Hey, Kluckleitner. Glad you're joining us from Austria. You could probably have a slightly stronger beverage than we
Yes. In fact, we hope you are.
But this has some good kind of high stakes moments, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I felt that the sort of testing this metaphasic shield, essentially this Joe Brill is going to test it, and he dies, and he comes, and they basically like bring him back, and they're like, all right, shut everything down, this isn't, and the Ferengi's like insisting that this is not his fault, that it wasn't the test that went wrong.
Yeah, he's like really mystified about what could have gone wrong, which helps Beverly, you know, conceptualize foul play.
Yeah, exactly. And then kind of it goes on, and she basically like takes the shuttle and just goes, which is a little out of character. I mean, it was kind of interesting to see that drive for her. I don't know. What did you think about that?
Well, it was sort of the I have nothing to lose, therefore, you know, and Guinan is the one that pushes her to, you know, take that step, because she's like, you're not actually breaking the rules because you're not technically a Starfleet officer at this present time. And I thought that was, I mean, it was risky, and it was, I don't know that I would call it out of character. I think I would just call it maybe a little, someone at the end of their rope, you know. I'm not sure I'd call it brave. You know.
Yeah.
But it was someone like, see, this is what's so interesting for me about these like really sciencey episodes. Like, I'm not a scientist. I don't really have that brain that's like, I must find out the truth of this, or I must keep going until I prove this theory, or I have this like that kind of need to, you know, continue experimenting and continue and prove this hypothesis kind of thing. And I think this kind of demonstrated that sort of single-mindedness, not in a bad way, but like just the approach to, I need to find out, you know?
Yeah, and pulling on that science thread, I think that an interesting thing that they show here, which is pretty allegorical for the scientific community on Earth, is that it transcends a lot of international boundaries and cultures. You know, I used to work in LIGO, which was an international, it still is around, but it's an international collaboration with, I mean, when I was in it, it was about 50 universities and 1,000 scientists from all over the world. And it was, you know, I mean, we could talk about the Western centrism of sort of being an English-speaking based, you know, collaborate, like defaults, science defaults to, you know, English-speaking, and that's a whole other discussion, but just this idea that, you know, I would go to meetings and it would be Russian scientists, Chinese scientists, you know, you'd have Japanese scientists and scientists from India and Africa and like all genuinely all over. And we never, you know, even just at these collaboration meetings discussing politics, it just didn't even come up because we knew each other because of science, and that was our shared language, and that's what we shared and got excited about. And that was kind of the vibe that I got from this when she puts this summit together, and they're all kind of, you know, what, you have a Ferengi, you have Jobril's species was like not Temerian.
I don't know. He was gross.
Romulan, right?
Vulcan. Was there a Romulan there?
I think there was a Klingon, the Klingon scientist. Awesome.
Yes. And the Vulcan with her husband.
That's right.
I feel like there might have been a Romulan there, though.
Yeah. But it was just neat to see that, like, they wasn't species based.
Exactly.
It was genuinely a bunch of scientists wanting to get together and hang out and figure out this cool metaphasic shield. So that's kind of neat. I did like that. I thought that was a neat component. Because we always, too, I mean, we've made jokes about this before, but, like, you know, they are always going off to their conferences, which is usually an inciting incident for something bad happening.
Either to that team or the team they've left.
Exactly. But it was nice to see a scientific conference.
Exactly.
Was fun. So like not a bad episode. I think the stakes are pretty good. It was nice to see some of the characters. Obviously, like, I super attached to the Klingon scientist. I liked the Ferengi. And then just to see their characters, like a big kind of whodunit type thing go down. And
it was a cool reveal actually in the shuttle when the guy's like kicks out of the containment like storage thing. I was like, did not see that coming.
Yeah, seriously, it's a good reveal. It's a great twist.
I'll say the one out of character moment for Beverly was when she did the autopsy on the Ferengi. That was way weird.
Right, because they make a point of it. Hey, Mikhail, yes, happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
She made a point, like, they made a point of saying that this is against Ferengi culture to do this. But I think that was, in a way that they did stick with her, is that she did take responsibility for it. It's not like she was blind to her actions. She just made a bad decision. But again, I think that points to the, like, I don't have enough evidence. I need evidence, and I'm gonna do this thing because I just can't not know the result here. Which I find it's admirable, and but I find that's a through line personality trait of particularly the science oriented characters in the show. Yeah, and we've had those ethical discussions before, and I think the thing with this episode is that they don't have the bandwidth to get into it in the way that, like, that ethical discussion has been the focal point of some episodes that we've discussed. But yeah, phrase Joe Brill he's a good character. Like, he's a good character. It was neat to see that. And then welcome back, Aaron. Guinan, is great. I
just love her. At the end, she gets to, like, close the button on these episodes in such a fun way. Like this one, she's like, I don't play tennis.
Yeah, that was so good. Brilliant. Really neat. So, all right, any other final points on this one?
No, not really.
I think we're good. Awesome. All right, so next episode, Rightful Heir. I'm excited to talk about this one. Try not to be too surprised. So this is the one where basically Worf has this, like, crisis of faith. So he goes to Boreth, which is something we've seen before. I'll come back to it. But it's supposed to be this very religious area. And they resurrect Kahless. And Kahless comes to Worf, knows all these things about Worf. And there's this whole power structure here. And it's interesting. I think it's fascinating. So the Boreth tie, for those of you who might have missed it, this is the time crystal place that from Discovery.
I knew I recognized it.
That's the
like
with
foggy. Like, oh, okay.
It's a thing. Yeah. Exactly. So I'm curious. Well, and then so the big reveal is that Kahless came back, but he was actually, like, cloned. It wasn't actually a resurrection of Kahless. It was a purposeful cloning and bringing him back to essentially shift the power structure of the Klingon Empire, which I can talk forever about. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I will say, before it got to that part of the whole, like, why they're using him and stuff, like, I kind of glazed over during that conference room scene, basically. I wasn't following that too much. But before that, like, this really was the first Klingon-centric episode where I felt like I got it. Like, I felt like I knew enough about Klingons and their differences and their similarities and, like, their culture and history, that I was like, okay, I can kind of follow this. I can get into this. I get this story, and this means something to me.
Nice.
And also, I mean, the fact that the two-parter Birthright came back, Worf was still thinking about that, and so that made me sort of go back to that episode a little bit, which I didn't love, but this made me go, oh, okay, that really was important for Worf in this really deep way, and he's grappling in a much more closely with that than we've seen him do before, in my opinion. And so I appreciated the diving into the religion side of the Klingon culture, and I think they mentioned Sto-Vo-Kor a lot in this one, right? And I was like, I knew from Voyager, from the B'Elanna episode, so I was like, Sto-Vo-Kor, I really like that.
Starting to get it, that's
and I'm
awesome.
making these connections, and
Good.
Yeah.
I wonder if some of it too, because I felt watching this episode as opposed to some of the other Klingon politics episodes that we've discussed before, particularly in TNG with, you know, Gowron and the power structure and all of those. I felt like this one though is more along the lines of like like how I feel like Discovery, not just because they have the Boreth tie, but in the way that you saw these sort of different houses of Klingons and different like philosophical ways of running the Empire. Even though it wasn't necessarily a direct thread, like as direct as it was with Boreth, I still feel like that there's a more, you know, permeating background sort of similarity to how it's discussed in Discovery. So that might have helped too.
Could be, yeah.
As opposed to it just being this, and then that family and that family,
yeah,
and then massacre, and then
there were a lot of things in this episode that made me really think, like, I get it. And in fact, that like, Gowron comes back, you know, or just comes. He's in the episode. Yeah, and I was like, oh, I know that guy. Like, I remember learning about him and what he does and stuff. So it was sort of like, I wasn't watching this whole episode going like, what is happening? right. Well, and I mean, we all joke about Gowron's crazy eyes. Like, but there is, I think, like, it works to the benefit, though, for, like, the casual Star Trek viewer, because it's so distinctive that it's like you're not just have all these Klingon names that are sort of muddling around in your brain. You're like, I know that guy. Exactly.
and that works. I think that's a good aspect of his character.
Yeah, but definitely.
I love it. And so there's an interesting discussion in this episode too, kind of about exactly phrase. About the religious leader, like what it means to be a religious figurehead, and like his having Kahless be cloned and be back with memories and with, you know, a lot of with Kahless's traits versus Kahless being resurrected in a spiritual sense brings up some interesting discussion philosophical.
I agree. Yeah. I think this episode touched on essentially like what is faith and what is important for you to have it. Like, is it important at all for a materialization of the prophet or whatever you want to call it? Is that really as important as it does? That, like, does seeing that make your faith stronger, or is your faith stronger because you don't ever see it, you know? Or and then it's pretty morally gray, I think, to like do the cloning thing, because they're basically tricking they're tricking people who have the faith, you know, like, and then once that becomes dismantled, you go back to questioning, like, well, what's even real now? Or quote unquote real, you know?
Right.
But yeah, what did you think of?
Well, and they kind of touch on it pretty well. I feel like you know, maybe I had this discussion in my mind. I don't remember if it was in this episode explicitly, but I think it was explicitly kind of said, where they basically say, like, if you had been upfront about this would be a different discussion. You know, like, if they, or at least that was sort of the attitude I was getting, you know, with Worf, particularly with his frustration with what had happened, where it was like, look, if you just brought back this leader, you know, and said, hey, we have the technology, we need this, we need our leader back, it would be a different discussion, as opposed to like faking an entire resurrection thing. And
exactly. It's like, you know, man behind the curtain thing. If you just would admit that it's not the real Kahless, but it has components of him because of XYZ, and then we start from that square, as opposed to pretending that he'd actually return. Like, that's a whole different, you know, motive, really.
Right. It's really interesting. I feel bad for Kahless. You know, he's a
I
good,
don't.
he's a good character. I think he was played pretty well, and I feel like you kind of got to know a little bit more just about Klingon culture without it having been just like shoved in your face. You know, that it was funny though. I mean, the fight, you know, between him and Worf, it was kind of like the Obi-Wan Vader fight of, you know, A New Hope, the sort of older guys duking it out.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Did make me appreciate my Batleth though. There was a little bit of me like, well, I love that thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So yeah, good. It's an interesting episode though.
It is, yeah. Very, very interesting topics that you could definitely have very long philosophical
right.
discussions on.
See, it's interesting, Erin, when I Kayla's shoe store. For me, I always, when I hear the name Kalis, I don't know why I have it in my brain that Kalis is a woman. Like, it takes me a second to remind myself that, like, Kalis is a male Klingon.
Maybe Khaleesi. That might be what you're
thinking of. I don't know what it is. It's weird. I don't know if it's just the way that they've had the other names that, you know, you have these short, just with the nature of language or whatever. But anyway, it's funny. Yeah, it's something to do with that. It's fascinating. So, second chances. Yeah, I think like Kaler and like some of the other ones, there's just the way that they've had female Klingon names versus male Klingon names. I don't know how, it just always takes me a beat to be like, Kalis, male Klingon. But anyway, second chances. Tom Riker. We
love our Riker episodes.
We love it. And
except for the clip show.
Right. Yeah, so basically they go find the I did not put down the proper nouns as much as I should have. They found Riker's old ship, like that had crashed on this planet that he was able to escape a decade earlier or something. And they go to investigate this wreckage, investigate the planet. I forget the inciting incident that actually makes them go to do that. But Riker's there. And Riker meets Riker. Dun, dun, dun. What happened? There's some great transporter babble, because this is one of those where it's actually in favor, and this isn't a Science of Star Trek discussion, but this is one of those that you put in the box of they send the data about the person, not the person themselves from when they're transporting, because they basically had to punch through this atmosphere, and in order to get out, they doubled the beam, but without realizing that, one beam got through, then they shut off the other one, but it basically reflected back down, and he materialized back on the planet thinking that he hadn't made it out, which is super messed up. And yeah, then they bring it back, and and the exception that proves the rule. Aaron was mentioning the clip show episode. But yeah, then he thinks that he's been lost for so long, and finds Deanna Troi like on the ship and is trying to reminisce with her and be like, I'm so sorry I didn't meet us. Like, we had that plan to meet, and maybe we can pick up where we left off. And she's trying to fill him in on like how her relationship with Riker did unfold, and that they're not the same people anymore. I don't know. I really like this episode. What are your thoughts about it?
I loved it. I mean, I think it was a pretty solid coming up against your, past or younger selves or some in that genre vein. I think it was pretty well done in that sense. And Deanna's funny though. She, like, I don't know. She totally goes for it with her past Riker person.
Yeah.
And I just don't, I mean, what was she thinking would happen? Like, I don't know, but also like, I love how the crew's always um, like they meet this guy in there, they eliminate, you know, clone, alien, what other stuff, and then they're like, okay, this happened. This is actually Will Riker. Like this is actually him, and they're like, we're gonna move forward with that, and that's the thing. Like, you know, they're like totally cool with it.
That's like you said on the last stream that we did, where you're like, the memos that go around the Enterprise must be super weird. Where it's like, yeah, you're gonna see Riker in a lower rank. That's not the same Riker. Yeah,
exactly.
And there's some questions going on in the chat about like the mass itself, and this. So really briefly, and then we'll get back into the Troy discussion, but Star Trek contradicts itself. So sometimes it says, all right, it's sending the particles, it's sending the actual mass of the person. This is the example where they're sending the information and then they're made out of mass somewhere else. And one can infer that the mass that they get to make that person on the other side is like essentially, you know, the same stuff that they have replicator goo out of, right? That they have molecules, you know, this sort of spare matter that's going around the ship that they're able to build people out of, we think. That's the best.
Well,
best way.
I was thinking, like, it's really hard to believe that these kinds of accidents don't happen more frequently.
O'Brien would want us to think that they don't, but we know.
Yes, and Barclay has a point.
Yep, exactly. But yeah, going back to the Deanna Troi discussion, I think it's one of those where she's faced with the what might have been aspect very in your face, because you always think about like, oh, if my life had taken a different route, and you do have those moments in your life where like you did make a decision where it was like, I have a big life decision to make. And I think most of us have been there where it's like, I can do this or I can do this. And when you go back and reflect in those, very rarely you're never gonna actually meet or be faced with those people and those emotions from that exact time. Right? Because you always, you know, it's that whole discussion of like, well, if you went and made that different choice now, then you're not the person that you would be now. For better or worse, you don't know, but the thing you do know is you wouldn't be the same person, because it's those experiences that shape us. But it was interesting because they start to get a little bit more into Riker and Troy's, because you'd asked before, you were like, what is up with the two of them? Are they not? And then they've scratched on it in this season, in the sense where it's like they've actually had that discussion about, you know, dating outside of each other, always being there for each other, that sort of thing. But this was basically like, well, we chose our careers, and very specifically Riker chose his career, that he was ambitious and didn't, and I didn't get that there was any sort of malice necessarily on Troy's behalf, but it was very much like, we made this choice because Riker reflected on where he wanted his career to go. And we were both okay with that. But they had that discussion prior to this meeting that was supposed to happen, and then they never met. They decided not to meet. But poor Tom Riker is left thinking, oh God, she's waiting for me. You know?
Right. So yeah, I mean, it was interesting that his frame of mind was so in that spot of he just left Deanna and has been gone for 8 years, and assuming or just thinking she's there, and he's still in the frame of mind of, you know, deeply in love, and so he comes to it from that perspective, whereas they've had 8 years of growing, you know,
and conversation, and you know, that
exactly,
that ability to see what's good or not for each other, and have those discussions. Whereas when you're isolated, you just build your own headcanon about the people around you. And,
exactly. Yeah.
Not to mention that he feels like he was left for dead you know, that he's just like, everyone thinks that I died. So, am I ever going to see him again?
Yeah. Crazy.
Tom. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. And I do like how they closed it out. Like, it's such, like you said, it's just one of these weird events that happens, you know, that happens on the Enterprise.
Yeah. And it's just like, you know, 5 years down the line, he's going to get promoted. And so there's going to be 2 red uniformed Rikers. And there's going to be like a who's who. There was a few moments in this episode where I was almost convinced that he was going to turn weird or some mental thing, and he was going to like pretend to be the other Riker, and like, you know, it was going to take a turn, but it didn't.
We're glad it didn't. They've done enough. We got to give Deanna a break.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do like how they kind of neatly closed it out, where he just said, you know, he's like, I have to find who I am again.
Yeah.
And who I am is not that person. I don't want to follow that same path. And the person I was in love with is not the same person anymore. So I have to find my own. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a good ending.
Yeah. I really like second chances. It's Tom. And he's like, I don't know. It's just, they do a great job of writing him like he's a different Riker. Like, he feels different. And there's some similarities, but there's a lot of differences to their behavior, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, and it makes you think, like, if you were siphoned off from yourself, you know, 8 years ago, and that person versus the person you are now, like, you would grow differently, and you do. So it's interesting. They
did a good job of portraying that. So the next episode is Timescape. So this is where... Were they all on they were on an away mission together? Picard...
Coming back from a conference.
Conferences. Picard, Troy, LaForge, and Data are all coming back from coming back from a conference. I remember them imitating the different
the people. Banter was so funny in the cold open. That was like, and it was just a fun like moment of them like kind of laid back, you know, getting to complain about the Data's so confused.
Yeah, exactly. It's so great. And the DTG, there's something about conferences that just, it breaks time, it breaks all those things. But it is kind of a cool, like, I have conflicting feelings about this episode, because I think it ends up getting very convoluted. But it starts out really interesting when they're having their banter on this shuttle, and, you know, they do a great job with the filming and the direction of it, where Deanna's, like, talking, being part of the conversation, then suddenly everyone's frozen around her. And she's kind of like, what is happening? And then everyone picks back up. And they're trying to figure that out. And then they're all having a conversation again. And then suddenly it flashes for her. And everyone's in a different position trying to figure out what's going on with her. And now she's the one that froze. And so they do a great job of having, like, both perspectives as the viewer. Being in that what just happened type realm. Then it turns out there's temporal fractures everywhere. And they come across the Enterprise, and it's frozen in time, fighting a Romulan ship, and then they gotta go on the ship, and Beverly Crusher's, like, frozen with a phaser beam from a Romulan, like, hitting her. And...
Yeah, but I mean, I liked the beginning of this episode, the first half, and then the latter half was just kind of like, Because, I mean, the first half, where they're having to try and... determine what was happening based on just seeing the people frozen.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't know all the facts of it, which I thought was kind of cool.
That was pretty cool. And then you start to get these time bubbles. And yeah. Honestly, DTG, so that they have this whole scene, and this is where I actually think from this point on, this is where the episode goes downhill. When they're back investigating, and Picard starts to lose his brain, and he starts to get all giggly, and there's like a frozen cloud, and he's laughing and pointing at it, and then there's a smiley face drawn in it. And every time I see that, I'm like, this isn't real. Like, that had to be someone messing around in the editor booth that was just like, what if I drew a smiley face in here? Like, it's just...
I have to admit, I missed it. I missed the smiley face.
Yeah, it's in there. When he's pointing and laughing at the cloud, and you don't see anything, and then it flashes back, and then it flashes back again, and there's this weird smiley face drawn into it. It's so weird. And yeah, every time I see it online, I'm like, oh no, that was actually in Star Trek. That wasn't some online thing that people made.
That's hilarious.
But yeah, and then they like it starts to just get very convoluted with like trying to find the fracture and the time that they have to undo and who's really the bad person, and then it ends up that it was like these alien creatures that had impersonated Romulans and were trying to like oh, that was it. This is the singularity drive. Oh god. So we find out that the Romulans basically use a mini black hole as their engine, which we've seen in other sci-fi series before, not so much in Star Trek. The idea is that they basically dangle out a black hole in front of their ship, like a tiny black hole, and so the ship is always falling into it, and so that's how it keeps going, because it's like constantly falling into this singularity. And there's an alien species that apparently nests their young in black holes, and they mistook the singularity, in, as DTG said, as a real black hole, nested their young in there.
Yeah, that was really far-fetched, but also like, this is the first time that's happened.
Right, and the consequences are so extreme.
Yeah.
Then they take over the Romulan bodies. Then they're trying to and have caused all these fractures. So it's like now we have time fractures plus alien invasion of the body snatchers, plus engine problems. Yeah. And then we find out that actually like the Enterprise was trying to help the Romulans against these aliens, and like all the frozen scenes weren't actually them battling the Romulans, it was all them battling these alien creatures. And that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I think the things that just pull me out of this is that stupid smiley face, which is like funny, but it's still just like, what? And then when they rewind the time, they're all like walking. Oh god. And that's where I just kind of lose reality in this episode.
Yeah, like no. Yeah. That's it for me.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I've vented a lot about it, but what did you think?
I mean,
what else did you think?
It was fun, but I kind of feel the same. Like the first half was entertaining and kind of creepy and cool sometimes, like with like the way they're experiencing the temporal anomalies and everything. But yeah, by the latter half was just kind of not that great to me.
Yeah. All these big reveals, and it's like, oh, and this.
Yeah.
It was funny though. So I will put this up front. I have watched all of the Orville. I do really like the Orville. The one gripe I do have with it is that while it gets lauded for being very Star Trek feel, there are some times where it is just plots of Star Trek, and it's very much like invading on the IP of these stories, to the degree of like, just sometimes it happens, like I see it in Orville and I forget that it's directly pulled from Star Trek, but the bubble with the time thing where he stuck his hand in and it aged really fast, that was an Orville episode called Old Wounds, where they basically had these like temporal bubbles that had the time be vastly different, and like that exact sort of scene happens in the Orville. But it's still, it's, temporal bubbles. Woo, that's fun.
Yeah, good times.
Good times. Yeah. And like DTG said, sort of turning off a beam with a tricorder. It's like, let's just pull all the ideas. That maybe this was like 3 different stories that they all just were like.
It kind of felt that way, yeah. It was just kind of a jumble of ideas, and you could tell they were like excited about it, but it didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah, the rewinding time is
You're just like...
that's the one that got me.
Mm.
Oh, I forgot to mention, because I always get these 2 episodes because they're back to back. And we spend so much time like in engineering and Timescape. I always think it's this, but it's actually in Second Chances, where we got to see Mae Jemison, who is the first Black woman in space, has a guest appearance, just a background walk-on role in Second Chances.
Really?
So that's a fun fact. Yes.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, so she has, there's, I mean, you can look at the images side by side, but it's really, really cool. Where they have images of her actually in space and then images of her on the set of Star Trek, and it's like, here's a woman doing the same job in different times, and it's
cool. That's so awesome.
And actually, like, she, you know, attributed wanting to become an astronaut to watching Star Trek, and Nichelle Nichols was a, you know, big inspiration for her, who played Uhura in the original series. And Nichelle Nichols was on set. They brought her on when Mae Jemison was filming, so they could meet, and there's a great picture.
Oh, that's awesome. I can look that up.
It's really cool. Yeah, so fun fact. Anyway, all right, Descent.
Well, speaking of guest appearances, let's go on to Descent.
Yeah.
Shall we?
We shall. I mean, this kind of, it's funny, Descent wraps up these 6 episodes that we've talked about actually really, really well. Like, as these, because we have the metaphasic shield thing that Beverly Crusher had in the first one. We have actors playing their twin selves, primarily in this one as well. So Descent is the 2-part, end of season 6, beginning of season 7, where... So when I take these notes, when Samantha and I make these notes for our discussion here, I will just go and grab, like, the first couple episode descriptions, like, first couple sentences of episode descriptions from online, just so we have a reference for these. And this one, all it said, like, was, in this episode, they encounter the Borg again. That's all it said for this 2-part episode. And it was like, and also, fun fact, like... That's all it said.
That's hilarious.
That kind of just sums it up.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I wish this is better than it was. And I was venting about this morning when I was trying to finish it for the 3rd time. Because I want it to be better than it is. It has data and lore in it, and I love the lore storylines. It has this whole idea of the emotion chips. We have Hugh, and we have the Borg. Like, there's so many elements of this story that, on paper, I'm all about. Yeah. And this would be very high on my list of favorite episodes. And it's just, I don't know what it is. Was it just me?
No, it wasn't. I'm glad. I was really felt validated when I read your notes on that. I was like, okay, thank God. Because, like, I also wanted this to be good, but it just felt so heavy-handed and laborious. And I mean, I liked that they called out they referenced back to when he went back to the collective and what actually happened.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool to see that wrapped up in a way. But then, like, lore trying to build the Borg, just, it was kind of strange. And
oh, DTG, nice.
Oh, that's so awesome. And it just felt like it wasn't that well put together story-wise. Like, it seemed really out of character for Data. And I get that he's a machine, so you could manipulate how he's doing things, of course, but it just still seemed so off and so out of character that it was like lazy writing. But
yeah, it took his emotion, his lack of emotion, to a degree that felt out of character.
Yeah.
You know, and I think too, just kind of as we were talking about it, there's a lot of long speeches in this. Yeah. I think that's really what gets me, is there's a lot of, like, lore giving these grand reveal, and it's just, and Picard, like, they're all just having these long extended scenes that I think just slows the pacing of the episode a lot, and I think was maybe why I struggled with it a little bit. Yeah, I mean, there were a few things that positive, you know, we don't just want to bash episodes here. There are some I did really like seeing Beverly Crusher in command.
Yes, that was awesome.
For an extended period. She's, like, in charge of this rescue mission. and throughout the two-parter. I did really like how she had that lieutenant, the science officer on. I think she was she lieutenant or an ensign?
I think she was whatever one's below lieutenant.
Ensign, yeah.
Ensign.
So she was like, who had come on and was like giving them information, and then she was about to go back and leave the bridge, and Beverly was like, I need a science officer at that station right now. And she was like, all right. And so she goes. And I think it was such like a genuine scene, especially at the end when they were talking about, you know, what they have to do to protect themselves and shield in the sun. And she throws out an idea, and that other guy was so, I mean, it was classic that,
yeah,
it was like, you don't know what you're talking about. This isn't a classroom, Lieutenant. Like, you don't understand. And she's like, I wrote my thesis on this. He's like, yeah, but this isn't a problem. And if you screw this up, she's like, I know. And I think it was so well written to have Beverly be in charge there, because that was one of those things that's why we talk about representation being so important up the leader chain, because then she can step in and say, no, I trust her. We're going to do this. Back
Absolutely.
off, bro.
Yeah.
You know? So those were sort of Beverly's scenes, I think, were probably my favorite ones in these two-parters.
Yeah, actually, I would say exactly the same. She really shone in that role and was very calm about it and really on top of things. And that lieutenant, he had like a really weird moment at the end though, where he's like, she did it, right? And then they had this weird, like, I don't know, it was strange. Anyway, but she was awesome. Yeah. And Geordi was awesome as usual. Yeah.
His scenes with Data when he was trying to like pull him back and being like, you're gonna regret this. We're friends. You know, we have good memories together. That was a good scene too.
Yeah. But ultimately, I just did not find this like really engaging even. Like I was just sort of like, I don't really want to watch Lore and Data be like Lore pretending to be Hitler and Data like, you know, being controlled that way. And also to me, it was a little bit strange that Hugh, I love Hugh. He's awesome. He's one of my favorites. And I love that he saved Picard, of course. Yeah. But I just didn't find it, I wasn't sure why he chose to do that, I guess. And actually, now that I'm saying...
Why he chose to save Data?
Data, he was saving Data, not Picard, right? Yeah. Okay. Because, like, I guess he was just thinking back on the fact that Data represents his time on the Enterprise, which is really valuable, but I don't remember him particularly having a close relationship with Data. So I was like, why did he spring forward for that? But I guess also it was because he and some of the Borg were not liking what Laura's doing.
Right. That was going against. And they did do a nice, you know, story in the sense of, like, he did ask about Geordi. You know, that he was like, how's my friend Geordi?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. He was so great.
Yeah, and they did. They carried his story on really well in Picard. That you could see a straight through line to how he ended up.
Absolutely.
And so, that was really nice. I'm a big nope on the fingernail emotion chip thing. Hard nope. And they did it like 4 times where lift up his fingernail to get to the chip. And every time I'm like...
Because you feel that. You like, because we all know what that feels like. There's been 2 major nope nails moments when the aging nails in the previous one and this one.
That's another theme for
Please
these 6
don't.
episodes.
Just no with the nails. No with the nails. Thank you very much.
Hard pass. That was so disturbing.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I was drinking something when that first came on, and I like went like that and just sputtered everywhere. I was like, that's not okay.
Yeah, because no, not okay at all. And I think that for some credit, they had to do something with lore. They had to wrap lore up somehow throughout TNG, because they couldn't really just leave that massive plot hanging.
I honestly wouldn't have minded. I didn't like lore at all, so I'd be like, I would not even notice if he didn't come back.
Yeah. I mean, they probably could have got away with it, but what's more interesting is Data's interest in having a emotion chip.
Yes, yeah. That was the most interesting part of this, that they didn't really build it to me in the, I mean,
it was weirdly written, like it was, because it was kind of, I don't know, it kind of left me a little bit when he would talk about having this emotion chip where he was like, give me emotions, it brings me pleasure, and you're like, what? And it was like he didn't quite have the right words for what he was trying to where he's talking to Deanna at the beginning of part 2, I think, or it was at the end of part 1, where he was basically like, I think I felt pleasure, like I felt something, but he just doesn't have the words to associate the emotions.
But it's the fact that he was experiencing pleasure from killing somebody,
right?
And would and admitted that he would kill Geordi to feel that again. Yeah, and I was like, what? Yeah, that's the correct reaction. And then when the lore reveal came, I was like, oh, that had to be lore pretending to be Data, of course. Right. That would have, but that wasn't, and that's like, again. Yeah, and but I think that they've struggled with that before, and I want to look up really quick, and someone in the chat might get here before me. But when did First Contact come out with with respect to this episode? Because they had the emotion chip in that as well. Or was that Nemesis? No, that was Nemesis. Was that? I don't think that was First Contact, but I don't profess to have seen it more than once, so. Yeah. All right. 1996. Okay, and then this came out in 1993. So, yeah, it was First Contact. Because, I mean, I'm never going to get the Borg Queen scene out of my brain. But yeah, you remember. It came back. Thank you for that. It came crashing back, didn't it? Yeah, so this episode came out in 93. 96 is First Contact. All so right. Yeah, when he gets an emotion chip again. So this is the first time we've seen him with an emotion chip. Right, and I do think they did it better in First Contact. And yes, you're right. The motion chip did move around in terms of where it was, but they had to get rid of the fingernail thing. Because a bunch of us were just like, I never want to see. My fingernails are hurting as I'm. You can. Yes. It's just one of those things. Like, they're not supposed to do that. So I'm okay with them moving the location of the emotion chip around. But I mean, so we had this first introduction to the emotion chip. Now, I have seen First Contact way more than Descent, like dozens of times more. So that's I guess more how I envision Data's emotion chip, but like you said, it's still preserved like who he was at his core, and he's figuring things out. And then when you watch this, it is disturbing when he's like, well, I have to kill to feel this again. And it's like, surely Data would know, his internal logic sensors would be like, but I mean, it's weird that they're even going down that route to me, because that's how a sociopath or a psychopath feels. Right. You know, they don't have an emotion chip to they don't have an emotion chip to know that that's wrong. They know, they feel a certain pleasurable response from doing these horrible things, but they don't equate those horrible things as being horrible. And we've never had that be part of like Data's character. Exactly. You know? Yeah, exactly. So I just it makes me curious why they made that decision to do that. That's basically agreed. Ethical suffraging has to be reset. Yes.
And to be fair, I'm better with a toenail, partially, than I am with fingernails.
Toenails, like we stub our toenails, so like there's a little bit more there to be like, okay.
Yeah, but
fingers, that's like a torture thing.
Yeah.
To pull them, like
the amount of times.
Why are we still talking about it?
Pull the plug. Yeah, it's really, I don't know. The Data arc, I don't know. You're left kind of, I guess that maybe that's part of it, is that we've had so much character growth and we've seen so many cool moments that characters have had throughout these seasons. Yeah, exactly. But Data's arc here makes me like him less. And I think that's that's it. That's
exactly
why I like this episode.
That's exactly how I felt. Yeah.
All of that love and affection that we have for Data, you lost some of that in this.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say he's not really my favorite character, just overall. Yeah. I liked him a lot more in the beginning of this series. And as we've gone through, and even after watching Picard, he's not my favorite.
Yeah.
I like him, but he's not my favorite.
That's fair. And I think they try to recover some of it at the end of this, with the scene with him and Geordi. And it's a good scene, with him where he did recover the emotion chip, but it is damaged, but he still wants to destroy it. And Geordi stops him from destroying it. And he does, the scene where he says, "I express regret for what I put you through," was well written and well done. But I did have that visceral feeling of like you do when you have lost trust in a friend or a family member, that they've done something that you kind of left a bad taste in your mouth. And even though they repent for it, you're still, it's like, I'll forgive, but I won't forget type thing. And that's kind of how I felt with Data. Yeah,
you could feel like their relationship is not going to be the same, at least for a very long time. Yeah. So I think maybe we hit the nail on the head. Why we don't like this episode. Hit the nail on the head.
I didn't mean to do that. You brought it back.
I couldn't. What?
We're done.
Goodbye. Enjoy your Sunday. Not of things that start with N.
we figured out why this was not, like, they had the long speeches, they had sort of some convoluted stuff, but but I think it was the way we felt with Data at the end. I think that's why, and I don't know, maybe other people in the chat can chime in and say how they feel about this episode, but I think that's it. I think that's why I don't like it, is because I leave it liking Data less, whereas all these other episodes we've had are at least growth, if not a straight line,
Exactly, yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so... We made it.
We made it. And now season 7.
And we are in the final season.
I can't believe it.
I know. It's bonkers. It's crazy. It's going to be fun, though.
This is so exciting.
We are gonna have a lot of fun. So let me pull up where we're at while we're live, because we usually forget to do this live. And people have no idea.
Text Aaron like Wednesday night. So what episodes should I be watching?
All right. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ish. Yeah, so we've got Liaisons, Interface, Gambits, Part 1 and 2, Phantasms, and Dark Page. I think we'll go through those next week. Should be
looking forward to it.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us.
Thank you, guys.
Sorry about the direction.
Don't say it.
I'm not saying it. Sorry about where it went for an extended period of time. It is about to hit noon o'clock on a Sunday, so my license for doing what I really want to do right now, which is have a drink, is now okay. Thank you, the Rodman, for the follow. Sorry that I missed it there. And I really, I appreciate everyone hanging out, listening. This was fun. This was fun, Samantha. We made it through.
It's a good Sunday.
Everyone, take care of yourselves. I am going to be on later today on the Space Command Convention. You can find a link to that on Twitter. I'm going to be at 4 o'clock Pacific time. I am now going to be interviewed by Mark Zicree, who I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. So we're flipping the pages on that one. So that should be fun. That's 4 o'clock Pacific today. And then I will be playing some Mass Effect tomorrow. And our episode club on Tuesday, we're going to discuss the science behind The Martian. Mostly the movie. If you've seen the movie, that's fine. If you haven't read the book, that's okay too. We'll probably discuss some stuff from the book, but you don't have to have read it. But I'm looking forward to that. So that's it for me. Samantha, any final words?
Nope. Happy Sunday, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks. Bye.